If we want to understand the karmic implications of a chart, then we really need to understand Ketu and Rahu. And to understand Ketu and Rahu very deeply, you need to look at them in several different ways. I'd like to focus in this particular video on Ketu and Rahu through the Nakshatras. And I'll tell you why here in a moment, but first let's really get an understanding of what Ketu and Rahu are all about. Many people like to understand Ketu as being related to past lives or past karma. And you can understand an individual's past karma through looking at Ketu. And I'm going to explain why, and at the same time give you a hopefully more thorough understanding of what Ketu is all about. Ketu, I like to define as being associated with the security paradigm. It represents that way of reacting to our experience of consciousness that we have become most comfortable with. It's our relation to the universe, the relationship to the universe that we have become most comfortable with. Then when we end up in times of stress, we fall back on Ketu. It's what we are most comfortable with. It's what we know. Rahu, on the other hand, represents those things that we don't know, those things that are foreign to us. And it's for that very reason that Rahu is a factor we look at in terms of understanding foreign countries or foreign travel. Ketu and Rahu, similarly, are also like a separate ascendant or rising sign and seventh house or descendant, right? So if you understand the ascendant to represent the individual or the individual's point of view, and if you understand the descendant as representing the other or the horizon of the chart, which is really what the descendant is, then we can understand similarly that Ketu is like the karmic ascendant and Rahu is like the karmic descendant, I should say. Ketu represents the perspective we're most comfortable with, as I was saying before, and Rahu represents what we're being drawn to, the other that we're being drawn to in order to resolve that particular karma. Now, why the Nakshatras? Well, the Nakshatras are related to growing consciousness in general. The Nakshatras are known as the wives of the moon. And in Vedic mythology, it's the wives of a particular deity that carry the energy of that deity. So if the moon is about consciousness and growing consciousness, the wives of the moon carry the energy of growing that particular consciousness. So it's important to understand the Nakshatras in the chart. It's equally important to understand the state of the moon, because if the moon is not happy in a chart, that's going to color the individual's experience of consciousness. Similarly, the distance 1 nakshatra is from a person's birth nakshatra is going to color the experience of consciousness in relation to that particular planet. And that's a concept called Tara Bala. And we're going to look briefly at that today without going through all the individual taras. We're just going to give an explanation of the ones that surface for us as we take a look at a chart. If you want to know a little bit more about the individual taras in a chart, I do have a full-length course that I have done with fellow astrologer Ryan Korzak, and we do teach a technique on that, and you'll see a link to that course down in the bottom of this particular video. But in understanding the nodes through the nakshatras, it's really going to give a very well-rounded explanation of how the individual goes through his experience of consciousness, whether he's prompted by feelings of separation, whether the individual is prompted by feelings of frustration. All those things will come to the surface if we look at the Tara of a particular Nakshatra. And if we understand the meaning of the Nakshatra in general, that's going to give us even further color with which to define the individual's experience of consciousness. So why is the moon so vital to our consciousness in terms of astrological thought? Well, the moon is manas, or our sensory mind. And it's with our sensory mind that we navigate our experience of consciousness. So a good, well-supported moon and good, well-supported nakshatras will help us in growing our consciousness along greater and greater states of ease over the course of our existence. Ketu, back to Ketu for a moment before we get into our first example. So Ketu, if Ketu is the security paradigm and that method of reacting that we fall back on over and over again, then it's easy to understand how Ketu would relate to past karma. Because when we've done something over a long period of time, then it creates karma. It's like if water flows along a certain pathway over a period of time, it's going to carve out the riverbank or the shore of where it's flowing in a particular pattern. The more it flows in that area, then the more it carves out a pattern within that area. And it's similar with karma. And Rahu represents what we need to do in this particular lifetime in order to complete that karma with Ketu, to grow past that karma, to go through the experiences so that we can evolve even further. So let's take a look at our first example, which is quite simply person C. And if we take a look at this particular example, we can see Ketu in Uttara Bhadrapada and in Pisces, and Rahu in Virgo, and in Uttara Phalguni. So let's touch first on Ketu in Pisces and Ketu conjuncting the 7th house cusp and how that's going to tend to affect the individual who was involved with this. Ketu in Pisces generally represents a past lifetime or past in this particular lifetime where the individual felt more secure approaching their life with a sense of security, surrender, and just simple faith. Okay, when you have Ketu conjuncting the 7th cusp, that's going to add to that the person has quite likely become most comfortable within relationships, with the connection with another individual, or through connecting with the public, all of which are 7th house related matters. So Ketu in Pisces and the 7th cusp can create the tonality of wanting to merge in one's partner, as per Pisces, or wanting to have faith, complete faith and surrender to one's partner, and finding security in that in previous lifetimes. It's interesting to note in this particular example that the moon is something that's called the Dharakaraka. The Dharakaraka is itself an indicator for relationships. So here we have Ketu conjuncting the moon, which is the Dharakaraka. The moon is in Purva Bhadrapada, and it's said about Purva Bhadrapada that it elevates that which it comes into contact with. So it could have been quite possible in this person's case that they were with a partner in a previous lifetime that they found very inspiring, very soothing, but yet at the same time very changeable. But the person developed a sense of surrender and complete and utter faith in this particular individual. When Ketu is in Uttara Bhadrapada, which we need to talk about next, with Uttara Bhadrapada tends to show us those areas of our life where we are ignorant. It reveals to us things that have previously been beyond our knowledge or beyond our way of relating. And sometimes when that particular truth that dawns through Uttara Bhadrapada actually reveals itself to us, well, we can be kind of shaken to the core a little bit, and it can create some difficulty for us in our existence. So it could have been in previous lifetimes that this person went through a lot of experiences with their partner where certain things were revealed to them about their partner, and even potentially about themselves through relationships. And even though those may have been difficult truths for them to face and may have kind of shattered or their security paradigm to a certain extent, they adjusted to that by developing a sense of complete and utter faith and surrender. And we're just touching plainly on the nodes right now, not going too deeply into the conjunctions and things such as that. On the other level, with Rahu, what's going to happen for the individual in this particular lifetime is their consciousness is going to need to grow towards developing more of a sense of strength and sense of faith in one's self. Rahu is in Virgo as well, whereas in previous lifetimes, the person developed that security through faith and utter surrender. This time, they're going to develop their consciousness along the lines of hard work, putting energy in, sheerly for the sake of putting the energy into something as a service. Quite often with people who have this, one of the nodes in Virgo, especially Rahu, then it can create a scenario where they get involved in things that don't provide any level of satisfaction for them. And they can end up feeling quite frustrated due to that particular fact. But ultimately, the lesson is to do everything out of a sense of service, just because it's the right thing to do. Even if it doesn't bring a level of happiness, if it doesn't make them feel happy, then happiness with that is to be found through the act of service itself. Interesting to note in this particular instance that we've got Rahu in Uttara Phalguni. And Uttara Phalguni, on one level, likes to devote itself to a particular cause. It likes to put itself behind something. It's both Uttara Phalguni and Uttara Bhadrapada are both very spiritual warrior-oriented nakshatras. And so with Rahu and Virgo along those lines, this person, rather than growing completely from their relationships, they're going to grow themselves through a sense of complete and utter confidence in themselves. Because Uttara Phalguni also relates to something I like to call the divine contract, is somebody cooperating well with themselves in order to achieve what they need to achieve in this lifetime. Are they putting their energy behind their own cause, which is developing their consciousness? And quite interesting, most of these people will want to put their energy behind another cause too, which on a certain level, that other cause and their own cause are one and the same. So they're working out their karma through something external by projecting it onto an external environment, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but ultimately what they're looking for is to complete themselves internally. Let's take a look next at something called the Tara. And we're going to switch screens in order to do this. So we need to understand we've got a moon in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra. And this is determined by the ruling planet of a nakshatra, and it's repeated 3 times over with the nakshatras. So, in other words, there are 3 nakshatras within the first group ruled by Jupiter, 3 nakshatras within the second group ruled by Saturn, and so on in this particular case. But since they're all ruled by the same planet, they would be under the same listing. Okay, so we want to see the distance between the moon and Ketu, and also the distance between the moon and Rahu. So understanding the moon and Ketu, that previous lifetime energy of complete and utter faith in their partner, surrender to the relationship itself, even when the going gets tough and something's revealed to them, while they make an adjustment. And Ketu is in Sampat Tara. And with Sampat Tara, it's about approaching something with an open mind, being receptive, willing to listen. So in previous lifetimes, they were likely quite willing to listen to their partner and what their partner had to say when the going got tough within the relationship. And due to the interaction between themselves and their partner and the fact that they found their partner inspiring, they were most likely able to develop a deep sense of security within that particular relationship. In looking at Rahu, Rahu is in Sadak Tara. Sadak Tara is about perfecting things. It's about taking a look at the situation, taking a look at what needs to be done, and being willing to do the work necessary that's going to bring prosperity from whatever that planet is associated with, right? So basically, this means perfecting oneself through Uttara Palguni, perfecting oneself through putting one's energy behind a particular cause or behind one's own cause. That's just one of the many meanings of Uttara Palguni. Benefiting from what one has learned from one's relationships in the past, but applying that to one's own particular path is another way of looking at this. And one will be doing that in a manner that can help them to become more efficient, more perfected in terms of their life path, and being able to finish and complete the karma from the past. So they take a look at the situation, recognize that some adjustment needs to be made, even though they're not perhaps able to carry their life along the certain lines that they're wanting to carry it. They're willing to make an adjustment in this particular lifetime to put in the service because they know it's going to bring a level of perfection and will bring prosperity into their lives. Let's take a brief look at some of the conjunctions that were also existent within the chart, because we can see how things might play themselves out. So we have a Ketu moon conjunction. And obviously Rahu and the moon will be interacting too. But let's focus on Ketu moon, because what tends to happen with Ketu moon is the person will tend to disassociate with their feelings. They tend to put their feelings in a certain place because they have the capacity to feel more deeply than most other people do. And going into their feelings carries them sometimes into a very deep level of pain. And with Ketu and Pisces like this, just like they could surrender to their partner, they could surrender to the feelings that they're going through, sometimes in a way which isn't helpful to them. And in order to exist within the material world, well, they need to, or feel they need to put their feelings in a certain place. But it creates a unhealthy way of emotionally relating. So they need to find emotional balance where they're not repressing their emotions, they're allowing them to have a healthy flow, but by the same token, they're not allowing them to, not allowing themselves to be ruled by their emotions. So I'm not going to get into the Rahu moon interactions too, but just looking at the conjunctions in this particular instance. Because when we come over to Virgo, we've got Rahu, Mars, and Venus, all within Virgo. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what that might mean for Venus and Mars too, because we could spend an entire video on just this chart itself. Pardon me. But with that particular instance, Rahu Mars is going to relate to a need to develop the will along healthy lines. Quite often in these particular instances, the person has a very strong and passionate will. And with that strong, passionate will, it can sometimes not be harnessed very well. And generally with Rahu, Mars, there can be power struggles for an individual. In this particular case, the person probably likes to have things a certain way in their life due to it being in Virgo. And that's not always able to happen. And so it creates a lot of power struggles for the individual within their life. Rahu Venus is going to, by the same token, create a very powerful desire nature for the individual that creates a state of ideals which ultimately are not able to completely be satiated. And it makes the individual very unhappy along those lines. And both of these are in Virgo, right? So it's good that the person on one level has Rahu and Virgo, and it's in Uttara Phalguni. And it's good that in their Rashi chart at least, and it can be different in different areas of a person's life, the Rashi chart being particularly associated with the person's path. The person also has a decent sun, which is going to give them the capacity, because the sun rules Uttara Phalguni, it's going to give them the capacity to focus the energy of Uttara Phalguni in a helpful manner. So they'll be able to work out their karma by putting their energy behind a cause. This would be the most helpful thing for this type of person to do. Keeping in mind that this is also Sadak Tara, so the person is perfecting themselves. They're going to perfect themselves through something called seva, or selfless service, finding a cause and putting their energy behind it. But by the same token, they're going to have to learn that things cannot always work out the way that they would like for them to be. In our next chart, we've got someone with Ketu in Cancer conjunct the 6th cusp, and in Pusha Nakshatra, and Rahu in Capricorn conjuncting the 12th cusp, and in Uttara Ashadha Nakshatra. When Ketu is conjunct the 6th cusp, this tends to create individuals who have the belief system that hard work put in is going to help them to receive fruits from their labors. So the more hard work somebody puts into something, the better off they're going to be, because they're going to get a greater result. But with Ketu in Cancer, what tends to happen in connection with that is the person, much like in our last case, only with slight differences, the person tends to go more inward. And when they're dealing with difficult situations, they find more strength inside of themselves, and they become introverted, and they try to control the emotions rather than allow their emotions to flow in a healthy manner. Instead, they just put their emotions in a certain place, or if they're feeling emotional difficulty in relation to what they're experiencing, they'll just go inside of themselves rather than letting that be known to the world at large. And with Pusha Nakshatra, Pusha is about accepting limitations in order to achieve one's destiny. It's a Dharma-driven nakshatra. So with this, the right way seems to be accepting one's destiny, recognizing that in wanting to do something, one will have to accept certain limitations. And with this particular instance for the individual, it is likely going to create a sense of stress, because there's likely going to be a lot of loss in the individual's life. Why am I saying that? Because we've got the moon in the 12th from Ketu, and the moon rules Cancer. So that's going to signify a lot of loss for the individual. Accepting the loss, accepting the limitations as being a necessary sacrifice for achieving whatever it is that they're wanting to achieve, as we can see through Pusha Nakshatra. What is Rahu going to bring to the surface for the individual in this particular lifetime? Well, with Rahu in Capricorn, that generally tends to mean that the person looks to resolve that karma in very external manners in terms of their external life. They try to structure their external life to become more secure, because they're dealing with a certain level of internal insecurity. They're seeking that security within themselves as per Ketu, not finding it anymore. And so they're wanting to create it outside of themselves. With Rahu conjuncting the 12th cusp, the individual is going to want to do this to become free of all the hard work that's associated with Ketu and all the stress that's connected with it. But when things get imbalanced for the individual and their life gets out of control, which can definitely happen at many points in their life, and things likely for the individual won't get better until later on in life, because we've got Saturn, which rules over Capricorn in the 11th. And things in the 11th house tend to take a lot of time, and In addition to that, they require a lot of effort because the 11th is the 6th from the 6th. So it's another hard energy house to deal with. So in terms of that for the individual, when things are not able to be sorted in the individual's life, because we're dealing with the 12th house scenario, there can be the tendency to fall back on addictions and things that will make the individual want to escape until they find that balance between the internal and the external, which is going to be associated with Rahu in Capricorn. That's what's going to help them to become free, to recognize that, sure, having to accept those limitations, but not just putting one's feelings in a certain place about that, learning how to have internal security, a healthy relationship with the emotions is going to actually help to build a more secure external life, more so than trying to build a more secure external life in order to have a more secure inner life. Instead, it's the secure inner life is going to be developed through having a secure inner life, and the secure external life will follow as a result. And when that happens, then they will have a wider perspective on what they need to do and the approach that they need to have in their life, which will help to free them from all of that stress. Something that can likely be achieved over time for the individual, because with Uttara Ashadha Nakshatra, things happen eventually, further down the line, after further effort put in. The effort that is actually put in through Ketu, well, the person will meet with a lot of resistance, but eventually something will widen, because Uttara Ashadha is connected with the Vishvadevas, which are the gods of universal consciousness. So a widening of awareness, a more universal viewpoint dawns for the individual, which helps them to deal with the particular situation that they're dealing with, rather than getting so caught up in the daily grind that they're hoping to find security through. Instead, something eventually dawns on them, which helps them to understand the fact that they need to develop that internal security much more than they need to develop that external security. Let's take a look at the Tara in this particular instance as well and see what's going on with Ketu and Rahu. Ketu is in Prachak Tara. With Prachak Tara, the individual tries to find fulfillment. So going back to what we were talking about, dealing with limitations to achieve one's destiny, hoping to find fulfillment within oneself, but not finding that level of fulfillment. So the individual has to seek higher and higher levels of fulfillment, and that pushes them along a certain path. That's what they've become most accustomed to, right? Is things not working out their way, putting in harder work in order to try to achieve a greater level of happiness within themselves, but still always coming up short because of the Prachak association. Rahu, on the other hand, is in Parama Maitra. Parama Maitra is actually the best Tara for an individual to have a particular planet in, because that means, basically Parama Maitra basically means the best friend, or cooperating with the situation in a manner that's going to help the individual to achieve the highest level of success in association, pardon me, with their path of consciousness. So it's unity with what the individual needs to do. That's good in terms of having Rahu there, because that means that they're not going to give up. And they will actually eventually approach the situation with a higher level of awareness than they did earlier on in life, or actually in a previous lifetime. It tends to happen in terms of Ketu and Rahu, that with Ketu, whatever that past life karma may be associated with, the individual still carries it on into the early portion, at least, of this particular lifetime, and sometimes continues to act that out over the course of their entire life until around the mid-40s, where usually there's a growth for the individual, because that's when the nodes tend to mature for the individual, and they know how to work with whatever the nodes are associated with in their chart. They still have to go through the karma, but they're aware of what the situation is all about. that's just a couple of examples of how we can look at the nodes, both Rahu and Ketu, through the Nakshatras. Again, there is a full-length video course that fellow astrologer Ryan Korzak and I have put together that encompasses this technique of Tara Bala. It'll teach you about Tara Bala, all the different types of Tara, ways to work with it, ways to work with planetary dignity, so many other nakshatra techniques, as well as an individual explanation of each nakshatra, all available through the link which you will see on this particular page down below. Also, if you visit the site, if you are interested in this approach in relation to your own chart in terms of understanding your own particular karmic path, I do offer several different tiers of astrological service. That can be found through the link that's in the bottom corner of this video. Thank you.